Welcome to the deep dive. You know, when most people think bee, they think honeybee, but you sent us this fascinating PDF, Bee Basics, an introduction to our native bees, and, well, it's clear there's a whole hidden world of pollinators out there, so let's dive in.
Absolutely. I'm excited to unpack this with you. My background in ecology makes this topic particularly fascinating. There's so much to learn beyond the common honeybee.
Right. For example, I was amazed to learn that honeybees weren't even in North America until European settlers brought them over. The document really emphasizes the ecological and economic importance of our native pollinators.
It's true. Before we even get into the specifics, it's important to understand that native bees are responsible for pollinating a huge portion of our food crops. We're talking about a significant chunk of the fruits, vegetables, and nuts we rely on. In fact, Bee Basics mentions that a single native bee could be worth $20 to a blueberry farmer just from its pollination activity.
Wow, 20 bucks for one bee.
Okay,
Now, this might sound strange, but the document also mentions that bees are actually descended from wasps. Talk about a family tree.
it is fascinating. While they share a common ancestor, those predatory wasps evolved over millennia into the pollinators we know and love. The document even points out some bee species that still visually resemble wasps, which is pretty cool.
It really highlights the amazing diversity of the bee world. Speaking of diversity, Bee Basics delves into the difference between social and solitary bees. We all know about bumblebees and their colonies, but the document says that's actually the less common lifestyle.
Exactly. While honeybees and bumblebees live in social colonies with the queen, worker bees, and specific roles, a majority of bee species are solitary. This means they build and provision their own nests without the complex social structure, a hive.
That actually makes me wonder about those carpenter bees that are always buzzing around my porch. They seem to be on their own mission. But before we get into specific families, the document spends a good amount of time on bee anatomy, and I have to say it's way more interesting than I expected. Those little antennae, for example, aren't just for show.
Not at all. Their antennae are incredibly sensitive sensory organs. They use them to smell by detecting chemical signals in their environment, similar to how we use our noses, but much more specialized. Then you have those strong mandibles or jaws. They use those for everything from manipulating wax to defending themselves.
Right. Bee Basics also clears up a misconception I had about pollen baskets. I always thought all bees carried pollen on their legs, but apparently that's not always the case.
You're right, it varies. While many bees do have those pollen baskets on their hind legs, some species have them located under their abdomens, and others, believe it or not, carry pollen internally in a structure called a crop. It's like a built-in lunchbox. These differences might seem small, but they have a huge impact on how these bees interact with the plants they pollinate.
Fascinating. And speaking of how they interact with plants, let's talk about their nests. The document uses the term mass provisioning, which I have to admit I had never heard before.
It's a fascinating process.
Yeah.
Mass provisioning is all about efficiency.
Hmm.
Essentially, the female bee creates a single cell in her nest and packs it with all the food, a mixture of pollen and nectar that her larva will need to develop from egg to adult. It's a one-time effort, and then she moves on to provision another cell.
That's amazing. So different from how we raise our young, thank goodness. But it sounds like a lot of work goes into choosing the right spot for a nest and building it. What did Bee Basics say about that?
You're absolutely right. Choosing the right nesting site is crucial. Bee Basics describes a remarkable range of nesting habits in the bee world.
Oh, I bet.
Some species excavate tunnels underground, while others prefer cavities in trees or even stems.
Okay.
And then there are those who get creative with materials like mud or leaves to construct their nests.
It's like a choose-your-own-adventure in bee real estate. The document mentions mason bees using mud and leafcutter bees using, well, leaves. Are there any other interesting examples?
Definitely. There are carpenter bees, like the ones you mentioned earlier, which excavate their nests in wood. They have strong mandibles that allow them to tunnel through wood with impressive precision.
Wow.
And then there are those that take advantage of pre-existing cavities, like holes made by other insects or even those found in, man-made structures.
Oh, interesting. You know, when you think about it, that diversity in nesting habits, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if all bees competed for the same type of nesting site, it would be chaos.
Precisely. And this ecological concept of niche partitioning is something that Bee Basics touches upon. Different species evolving to utilize different resources, it helps to minimize competition and ensures the overall health and stability of the ecosystem.
It's incredible how interconnected everything is. Now, before we move on from nests, you mentioned carpenter bees and how they like wood. That makes me think about the ones on my porch again. Should I be worried? I know they're important pollinators, but I also don't want my porch collapsing.
That's a common concern. While carpenter bees do excavate wood for their nests, they typically aren't a major structural threat.
Okay,
They prefer softer, weathered wood, and their tunnels are relatively small.
that's good to know. Maybe I'll put up some bee houses to give them another option and, you know, steer them away from the porch.
That's a great idea. Providing alternative nesting sites is one way we can support native bee populations. But speaking of supporting bees, Bee Basics also dives into this fascinating concept of floral specialization.
Oh, yes. It's like they have their favorite restaurants. I remember the document mentioning squash bees and blueberry bees. They seem pretty set in their ways.
They are. Floral specialists have evolved alongside specific plants, developing a close relationship that benefits both parties.
Right.
Squash bees, for example, are incredibly efficient pollinators of squash, pumpkins, and other plants in the cucurbit family.
Okay.
Their bodies are perfectly adapted to navigate the large open flowers of these plants, and they're active when these plants are blooming. It's a beautiful example of coevolution.
It really makes you appreciate the complexity and interconnectedness of nature. The document also mentions a type of bee, Macropus, that relies on one specific flower for pollen and a different flower for nectar. That seems like a risky strategy.
It does highlight the delicate balance of these specialized relationships.
Yeah.
The Macropus bee relies on loosestrife flowers for pollen, but these flowers don't produce much nectar,
Oh, wow.
so they have to visit other flowers to fuel their energy needs.
Interesting.
This specialization makes them highly efficient pollinators of loosestrife, but also makes them vulnerable if something were to happen to either of their food sources.
That's a great point. It makes you realize that protecting native bees isn't just about appreciating their hard work as pollinators. It's about conserving entire ecosystems and the intricate relationships within them.
Absolutely. And while we're on the topic of relationships, Bee Basics doesn't just focus on the busy females. It also sheds light on the often overlooked male bees.
Right. They don't get nearly as much credit, do they? What did the document have to say about their role?
Well, as you might imagine, their primary role is reproduction. Male bees don't participate in nest building or provisioning. Their focus is on mating with the females.
So they've got one job. The document did mention male squash bees taking shelter in wilted squash blossoms. Sounds like a pretty relaxing life compared to the females.
It does highlight the different evolutionary pressures on males and females. The females invest a huge amount of energy in nest building, foraging, and provisioning, so it makes sense that the males would focus on ensuring their genetic contribution.
Makes sense. Now, before we move on to conservation, I have to ask about the bee family rundown in the document. I have to admit, seeing all those Latin names, my eyes glazed over a bit at first.
It can feel overwhelming. But each family has its own unique characteristics and ecological significance. Bee Basics highlights a few, starting with the Apidae family, which you could say contains some real celebrities of the bee world.
Right. Honeybees and bumblebees, what makes them stand out even within their own family?
They're both social bees, which is relatively uncommon, as we discussed. They form large colonies with a queen and a complex social structure. Honeybees, of course, are known for their honey production, which has made them valuable to humans for centuries. Bumblebees are incredibly efficient pollinators, especially in cooler climates, thanks to those fuzzy bodies and ability to vibrate their flight muscles to release pollen.
It's fascinating how much variation there is, even within a single family. What about some of the other families mentioned in the document?
Well, the Megachilidae family are the real architects of the bee world. This family includes mason bees, who, as their name suggests, use mud to construct their nests, and leafcutter bees, known for those perfectly circular cuts they make on leaves for their nesting material.
Ah, so those are the culprits behind the holes in my rose bushes. I have to admit, knowing it's for their nests makes me a little less annoyed.
I can imagine. And then there are the Halictidae, or sweat bees as they're commonly known. This is a huge and diverse family, and they're often overlooked because they're smaller than many other bees. They get their name from their attraction to perspiration, but don't worry, they're generally not aggressive.
That's good to know. Bee Basics also mentions the Andrenidae family, which they describe as often being mistaken for wasps. What makes them different?
Angrenid bees tend to be less hairy than other bee families, so they might resemble wasps at first glance. They're also known for being active very early in the spring, making them crucial pollinators for early blooming plants.
The early birds of the bee world. The last family the document highlights are the Coletidae, which they describe as primitive. Why is that?
The term primitive in biology doesn't necessarily mean less evolved, but rather it refers to groups that retain more ancestral characteristics.
Okay.
In the case of Callididae, some species carry pollen in their crop, an internal sac-like structure, rather than on their legs or abdomens. This is considered a more ancestral trait within the bee lineage.
That's fascinating. It really highlights the incredible diversity of adaptations that have allowed bees to thrive in so many different environments. Speaking of thriving, we have to address the challenges facing native bees today. Bee Basics doesn't shy away from the issue of conservation.
It's a critical topic. Native bee populations are facing numerous threats, including habitat loss, pesticide use, and competition from introduced species like honeybees.
It's a lot for these little guys to contend with. The document mentions colony collapse disorder, which is affecting honeybee populations. Is that a concern for native bees as well?
While colony collapse disorder specifically affects honeybees, it highlights this broader issue of pollinator decline, which impacts native bees as well. The causes of CCD are complex and not fully understood, but they likely involve a combination of factors, including parasites, diseases, pesticide exposure, and nutritional stress.
It's a stark reminder that even though we might not always see them, bees play a vital role in maintaining healthy ecosystems and ensuring our own food security. So what can we do to help? Bee Basics does offer some hope with its section on becoming a bee ally.
It does. And the good news is that even small actions can make a difference. One of the most impactful things we can do is create bee-friendly habitats in our own backyards.
Like planting a pollinator garden. The document really emphasizes choosing native plants. Why is that so important?
Native plants and native bees have co-evolved over millennia, developing this close relationship. Native bees are often specially adapted to pollinate the flowers of native plants, and in turn, these plants provide the specific nectar and pollen resources that these bees need to thrive.
It's a win-win, and it's not just about planting, it's also about what we're not doing right, like using pesticides.
Exactly. Pesticides can be harmful to bees, both through direct contact and by contaminating their food sources. By minimizing or eliminating pesticide use, we can create a much safer and healthier environment for bees.
And for those who want to go the extra mile, Bee Basics suggests providing bee houses. I have to admit, I kind of want one for my yard now.
They can be a fun and rewarding way to provide nesting sites for solitary bees, and they also offer a great opportunity to observe these fascinating creatures up close.
So we've gone on quite a journey with Bee Basics, from bee anatomy and nesting habits to the crucial role they play in our ecosystems and what we can do to protect them. It's clear that there's a lot more to bees than just honey. And for more on these buzzing beauties, check out the source material for this episode. We'll have a link for you on our website.
It's been great chatting with you. Until next time, happy being.
Always a pleasure. And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Catch you next time.